Hi Miriam. So I've got some more of your written work here, which is brilliant. You really are doing very well to submit all of these written exercises. We know it's not easy, but you're doing fantastically to keep up with this. It's great. And this really is the best way to improve your English. The first task that you had was about the bar chart. Let's have a look at that in some more detail. So the bar chart illustrates the amount of sales made in France by two major chip manufacturer companies in the year of 2017. Okay, good. This is a good way to start your analysis here. It's good. What I would say is this part, two major computer chip manufacturers instead of two major chip manufacturer companies. So two major computer chip manufacturers in 2017, so we don't need the year, so in 2017. Good. In the months of February and June, AMD and Intel reached their highest peak of sales, good, with 120,000 and 125,000 respectively. Okay, so here we can use the numbers. Okay, so 120,000 in digits and 125,000 in digits as well. What we do need to do though is to use the unit. So 120,000 watt, 125,000 watt. Okay. So to use the units there. Also, the proportion of sales made by Intel in the months of May, November and December in 2017 is almost triple. So instead of the triple that of AMD. Well done. Great work. Next one, while Intel reported June as the highest month of sales, AMD suffered the most drastic, instead of drastically, so drastic without the ALLY, decrease in the year. Good. However, in the period of September and October, a slight difference of nearly $20,000 occurred, led by AMD. Okay. So, good. So, a slight difference of nearly $20,000. Again, we can use the digits here. Occurred, led by AMD. Okay, AMD, sorry. So, yeah, so to have the digits rather than the words. Overall, the sales made by both manufacturers fluctuated heavily throughout, instead of all through, throughout, THROUGHOUT, throughout the year 2017 in France, except for the month of June, where we can state that AMD reported no profit at all. Well done, good. Furthermore, according to the bar charts, Intel was the company that achieved the highest amount of sales in France during 2017. Okay, well done. A really good piece of writing here. As you can tell from what we've said, the main corrections are not huge at all. It's only a couple of things. One of those is using digits rather than the words, so 120,000, because otherwise we've got a combination between the digits and the written word, so it's best to stick with the digits in this kind of activity. Okay, but yeah, great work, well done. Let's move on to your next piece then. So this is your second piece on the restoration of buildings, so it's your essay piece. Let's have a look at it. So experts throughout the world have long debated whether spend a large amount of the annual budget in restoring ancient buildings or use it in housing and urban development. Personally, I strongly disagree with the view of money spent on restoration purposes as futile or not imminent. This essay will discuss both perspectives, using examples from Mexico, France and England, as well as the UNESCO's Institute of World Heritage, to demonstrate points and supporting arguments. Okay, well done. A lot of great points in your introduction there. Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So, experts throughout the world have long debated whether to spend a large amount of the annual budget on restoring ancient buildings or use it in housing and urban development. Okay, so we're just missing the word to in between whether and spend, whether to spend. Okay, personally, I strongly disagree with the view that money spent with a T on restoration. Be careful with this word restoration, because in the middle, instead of an AU, we have an O. Restoration purposes as futile or not imminent. Okay. Okay. This essay will discuss both perspectives using examples from Mexico, France, and England, as well as the UNESCO, UNESCO Institute of World Heritage, to demonstrate points and supporting arguments. Okay, well done. Good. So let's go on to the first paragraph. So on one hand, there is ample evidence, good, that in major cities such as Washington, D.C., Paris, and Mexico City, a significant trail of history and culture can be appreciated through their urban architecture. Well done. That is a fantastic opening sentence to a paragraph. Okay. And very nice use of language, so significant trail of history can be appreciated through urban architecture is great. Really well done. The central reason behind this is twofold. Good. So twofold has a hyphen in the middle, so to-fold. Okay. Firstly, what I would do there actually is to end that sentence. So sometimes it's quite good to have quite a short sentence. So the central reason behind this is twofold, full stop. Firstly, each city has experienced a diverse range of historical events that impacted the way the cities and buildings were constructed. Okay, so here we don't need the comma. So of historical events that impacted the way, so no in, impacted the way cities and buildings were constructed. The way the cities and buildings were constructed. Okay, so impacted isn't followed by a preposition unless we use on, but here we don't need to use on, so impacted the way cities and buildings were constructed. Secondly, a lot of emblematic buildings embody relevant cultural assets that motivate tourist interest. Okay. For example, recent empirical research made by the UNESCO Institute of World Heritage has shown that cities which hold a considerable amount of old buildings, restored and open to the public, convey a major economic growth coming from the tourism sector. Okay, let's just go through that one again. Has shown that cities which have a considerable amount of restored old buildings open to the public convey major economic growth from the tourism sector. Okay, it must not be forgotten that a lot of cities profit largely from this industry. Okay, well done. Good. Really good. What I would say here is that you may benefit from having just a short sentence at the end to mention how this relates to the question. So, for example, saying, therefore, restoration is invaluable, for example, just to make it a well-rounded paragraph that is linked to your question. But really good points in here, very nice. So the next part, on the other hand, good, so we've got on the one hand, on the other hand, although investing in urban development in order to improve railroads, highways and adequate housing should be any government's priority, iconic city buildings function in many ways as a cultural touchstone that reminds people where they come from and leads to the cherish of a common path in history. Okay, so you might have noticed from my reading there, this sentence is a little bit long. Okay, it starts to get a little bit confusing as you're reading, purely because of the length. So what we could do is to split this into more kind of manageable chunks. Okay, so on the other hand, although investing in urban development in order to improve railroads, highways and adequate housing should be any government's priority, iconic city buildings are a cultural touchstone. Okay, so then we could end that sentence. So let's just go through that one again. So on the other hand, although investing in urban development in order to improve railroads, highways and adequate housing should be any government's priority, governments with possessive, so apostrophe S, priority, iconic city buildings function as a cultural touchstone, full stop. And then we could start a new sentence. They remind people where they come from. And now this part confuses me slightly, leads to the cherish of a common path in history. I'm not sure what your point is here. So I'm guessing that it could be leads to cherishing a city's history, perhaps. So cherishing as in seeing as very, very valuable. So cherishing a city's history. Okay, for instance, visiting the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, the London Tower, here we call it the Tower of London in England, and Mexico City, ancient post-mail building. Mexico cities, sorry. So Mexico, no apostrophe S, cities. Then we have the apostrophe S here, ancient post-mail building, can bring a person back to the Impressionist period, the time of Henry VIII and Mexico's revolution. Okay, well done. Good. Good historical references here. Consistent with this line of thinking is that tourist agencies have benefited more than any other service industry in the past decade. Okay, well done. Good work. So particularly this structure here, consistent with this line of thinking, is nice. Very good. What I would say is that, again, perhaps we just need a sentence at the end to round off this paragraph and show why restoration is important. What I would say structurally wise is that we've got a lot here on restoration in the first paragraph and the second paragraph, but not so much on development. Okay, so of railroads, highways and adequate housing. So it could be that we perhaps need to add a little bit more about roads, highways and adequate housing, and saying why this culture is more important than that. You've mentioned it in the tourist part, but it might be worth just making that very clear at the end of your paragraph. Okay, so to conclude, from the arguments and examples given, I firmly believe that spending enormous amounts of money in the restoration, so careful again with spelling, so it's an O instead of an AU in the middle, restoration of old buildings in big cities should not only be fostered but encouraged by both the government and the international community, due to the economic and cultural profits that can be generated. Okay, now, good points here and a nice summary. I would say that it's a little bit too much for one sentence, so perhaps there is a way that we can split it into two. Okay. So we could end this first sentence after encouraged, so to really make a strong point here. So we're saying should not only be fostered but encouraged, full stop. This is because of the economic and cultural profits that can be generated through tourism, for example, benefiting both the government and the public. Okay, something along those lines. So just seeing how we can break this into two parts rather than one long sentence, purely because you don't want the examiner to feel that a sentence is going on for too long and then lose the kind of efficiency of your language. Okay, but like I said, some really, really great structures in here. There was one that was particularly brilliant, and that was this one, consistent with this line of thinking. Great phrase to use. Well done. A nice signposting for the reader to show that all of your ideas are linked. Yeah, definitely a piece of work to be proud of. So congratulations. Well done.